In a small suburban town in America, a boy named Jake grew up in poverty. The town was filled with old, dilapidated houses, broken streets, and a life full of struggle. However, amidst all the hardships, one thing was always present every morning: the aroma of warm bread coming from the small kitchen of his house. His mother, a widow named Martha, was a homemade baker. Since her husband's death in a work accident at a factory, Martha had struggled alone to raise Jake. Every morning before the sun came up, she would start kneading the dough with her rough hands, calloused from years of work. She never complained, despite her exhaustion, because she knew that selling bread was the only way she could feed her only child. Jake had been accustomed to hard work since he was little. While the other children were still asleep under their warm blankets, he would help his mother arrange the freshly baked bread into baskets. Every morning, he would ride his old bicycle around town, knocking on the doors of their loyal customers. But not every day went smoothly. There were days when the weather was so cold that his fingers would freeze while holding the handlebars. There were also days when their regular customers moved away or couldn't afford to buy bread. Jake often returned home with a basket still full, seeing his mother sigh as she counted the loose change they earned that day. At school, Jake's life was no easier. The other children often teased him because of his worn-out clothes and hands that always smelled of flour. But Jake never got angry. He knew his mother was doing her best for him, and he didn't want to burden her with small complaints. Despite all this, there was one thing that made Jake different from the other kid. She had strong determination. He always paid close attention to how his mother made bread, how she mixed the ingredients carefully, and how she made sure every loaf was baked perfectly. In his heart, Jake dreamed that one day he could make bread that was better, bigger, and could be sold to more people. When Jake was 15, his mother fell seriously ill. She began coughing violently at night, her body grew weaker, and she could no longer knead the dough like she used to. Jake, still a teenager, had to take over all the tasks, from making the dough to baking and selling the bread. He tried his best, but his bread never tasted as good as his mother's. Customers started to decline, and the money they made wasn't enough to pay for his mother's treatment. Jake even tried working at a small restaurant at night to earn extra income, but it still wasn't enough. Then, one cold night, his mother passed away. Jake felt like his world collapsed. Not only had he lost the only family he had, but he also lost the spirit to keep fighting. He even considered leaving their bread business and finding another job. However, before she passed, his mother whispered weakly, "Don't ever stop dreaming, son. One day, you'll make bread better than I ever could." Her words echoed in Jake's mind, making him realize he couldn't give up. With renewed determination, Jake began learning more about making better bread. He read recipe books from the town library, watched how professional bakers worked, and experimented with different ingredients he could find. He didn't just want to make bread like his mother's. He wanted to create something special. But the road to success wasn't easy. At first, his bread kept failing. Some were too hard, some didn't rise, and some tasted bland. He spent many long nights trying new recipes, often having to throw away his baked goods because they weren't good enough to sell. However, after years of trial and error, Jake finally discovered the perfect bread recipe. He created bread that was soft inside, crunchy on the outside, and had an irresistible aroma. Slowly but surely, customers began to return. People in his town started talking about how delicious Jake's bread was. He then opened a small bakery with the savings he had accumulated. With innovation and hard work, his business grew rapidly. Jake didn't just sell bread, he also started making cakes and various pastries. As time passed, he began to think bigger. He didn't want his business to stop at just one small shop. He wanted to have his own bakery factory, where he could produce bread in large quantities and distribute it nationwide. With courage and a little funding from a bank loan, Jake started his first bakery factory. He hired people who had also experienced hard lives like him, giving them jobs and a new sense of hope. His bakery factory grew rapidly. He didn't just sell bread in his small town. He began shipping his products to other cities. The innovations he created, like bread with different flavors and unique textures, made him even more well-known. Before long, his business became one of the largest bakery factories in America. The name Jake's Bread became a famous brand, found in supermarkets and bakeries across the country. When asked about the secret to his success, Jake simply smiled and said, "I'm just continuing my mother's dream. I want everyone to enjoy bread made with love and hard work." Lessons from Jake's story. Jake's story teaches us that success doesn't come overnight. It is the result of hard work, perseverance, and the courage to keep dreaming, even when the world feels unfair. Jake lost his mother, experienced repeated failures, and almost gave up. But he chose to rise, learn, and keep trying until he was able to change his life. From a poor bread seller boy, he became the owner of the largest bakery factory, proving that no dream is too big if we are willing to fight to make it come true.